Hello everyone and welcome to the third Q&A video, and we got a couple of fairly good interesting questions and some that I have never answered before. First up is Ernie There Tro Kid. He has two questions. One, have you seen the anime Monster Rancher or the Japanese version Monster Farm? Two, with Zyuranger out now on DVD, what Super Sentai series would you like to see released that was not adapted into Power Rangers? One, yes, I have seen Monster Rancher. I remember it when it aired on Fox Kids, and I think they aired the first 8 episodes, then they were stuck in a really long loop of those same episodes, and frankly, that's where I gave up. Seeing those 8 episodes, I just wanted to stop, because I don't know what was going on. I never pursued if they finished dubbing it. I assume they did. I just don't know what was going on when Fox Kid had Monster Ranchers. I've never seen the Japanese version. It's not my forte. I've never played the games. Now, the second part of the question, since Zyuranger came out in America finally thanks to Shout Factory, and there are many of the 70s and 80s series that I actually do like. I've not seen them all, mainly because there's no fan subs available for them, but that usually doesn't deter me. I usually will watch things raw. I do know a little bit of Japanese. I'm not fluent. I've never bothered learning the language fully, but I could understand things and get my way through an episode. I would probably want to see Turbo Ranger, Live Man, obviously Jetman, because everyone always particularly loves that one. Let's see. Go Ranger, obviously that's the very first one. I'd rather see where it started from the beginning, and it's the longest one. Changeman I would like to see. Also 5-Man. I wanted to see the whole, school teacher aspect. Let's go on to the next question. It's from Lars Gillian. Do you think that the Die Rangers will star in the new reboot movie? No. The reboot movie is going to definitely only be about MMPR, and they're going to do their origin story, whatever way they do it. I don't know how they're going to do it. They're not going to involve anything from these seasons. There's no sense. That's just going to help confuse, and also for a new audience, because you can have the main series, but then also have this reboot series run concurrently. That just makes Saban brands and Bandai, etc. more money, and they if they do their cards right, they'll work in synergy and they won't have any issues. Putting in the Die Rangers makes absolutely no sense. They were never in PR in a normal sense. I know Jonathan Zukor included them in Super Mega Force, but at the end of the day, he didn't explain himself why, who, and how. Alright, next up, from Coolmo D21. Favorite and least favorite Kamen Rider series? And number 2, what are some of your hobbies that isn't Toku related? My favorite Kamen Rider series is definitely Fives. My least favorite series is probably Forze. And of course, a lot of people probably were going to say, oh, he's going to probably, the least favorite is Hibiki. I actually do like Hibiki to a degree. Not the whole thing, but I did like the way they were doing things. I love Fives because of the technical aspect. I love the Orphanok monsters and all the backstory they were planning up and the twists where, I'm forgetting names now. Fives, he was actually an Orphanok too. That's the reason why I worked on his belt. Now, what are some of your hobbies that isn't Toku related? Oh, I have a few bit. I love collecting comic books is one. I've been doing that since, kindergarten. A friend of mine in kindergarten introduced me to Marvel vs. Team Up issue number 107. That was my very first comic that I didn't own. My friend owned that, and that was an 80s comic. I don't know how he had it, because when I was in kindergarten, it was early 90s. I'm like, this is cool. And then I simply, found other comic books from, those series. By looking at Spider-Man, it branches you into Daredevil, Spider-Woman, Spider-Girl, Avengers, etc. She-Hulk branches you into Hulk and Wolverine, X-Men, and all this stuff. So it just simply branched out in that. And I'm also a DC fan. Not just Marvel. I love DC, Batman, etc. Superman, Supergirl, Wonder Woman. You can name it. Teen Titans, Justice League, Female Furies, whatever. You could think of all those small things. Blue Beetle is one of my favorites. The solo stories of Robin, I love those. So I used to collect a lot of comics. Back in like the mid-90s, I probably had maybe close to 600 comics, various issues, even like, you know, those dollar ones that you got in packs, and you know, you got a lot of stuff in them that were from unknowns. And of course I had a lot of Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Hulk, etc., etc. But over the years, in around the the 94 to the mid 90s, a lot of my comics had got discontinued, and for like nearly 8 years, I literally stopped reading them, so I had this huge gap. The majority of my comics had sold off because after so many years, you do get used to your comic being canceled and being revived, changed, screwed up in a way you don't like it, and canceled again, etc., etc., etc. I've gotten accustomed to it, but back then in the 90s, when something got canceled, I had to give it up. So after all those cancellations, I can remember Blue Beetle being canceled a lot, Robin, She-Hulk notoriously keeps getting canceled, etc. I sold a good chunk of those. Probably maybe now only have like barely 150 comics. I collect them now because, you know, after so many years, I'm like, you know, I'm not going to sell them and give them up. I'm going to keep them, read as much as I like to read, and, you know, till this day, for the past, like, I don't know, at least 10 years, I've always gotten a few comics throughout the years. I don't get everything. I don't believe in those ridiculous amount of Spider-Man comics. I don't like the crossover stuff in Marvel and DC that does, like, you know, how you have to read the Hulk issue whatever, and then you have to read Spider-Man whatever in order to get the story. I really can't tolerate that. To me, it's like, oh, I got to be forced to read this. I just want to get this specific series of Spider-Man, this specific series of Hulk, and that's it. Another hobby I like to do is collect video games, whether it's video games or the consoles. I love doing that. I love video games. I love all the game systems. I'm not really a fanboy toward Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft. I get pretty much all the consoles. I have a NES, in this case a Famicom, AV Famicom, the top loader version. I have a Super NES. I have a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, GBA, GBA SP, DS Lite, 3DS, 3DS XL, N64, GameCube, Wii U, PS1, PS2 Mini, and PS3 second version, and PS4. The only consoles I don't have is Microsoft, not because I hate them, but because I have a gaming PC. Excluding Halo is the only one that I really want. I don't have any other reason to buy an Xbox. But if I actually liked more games on Xbox, I would actually buy the Xbox console. But since I have a gaming PC, I strictly stick to that when it comes to gaming. Many games from many generations. I've kept them in good condition from boxes. Older games, imported games. I'll have Japanese versions. I have the Famicom Disk System, for example. I always wanted to have the better versions of NES games because, like, for example, the Castlevania games in Japan on the FDS system, you were able to save your progress, while in the NES versions you couldn't. I also just like having the Japanese version, and I have converters to play the NES games and vice versa. I have mod game consoles. I repair them for friends or myself. I usually region disable all the game consoles when they become obsolete. Like on the Super Nintendo, you break the tabs out, and you can play Super Famicom games. I'll have the Dragon Ball Z fighting games that never got released here. On the N64, same thing, tab problem, melted them out. I could play Pokemon Stadium #1, which was not released here. Stadium 2 was released at Stadium 1, and so forth. So I can play those imports, and I have like Pokemon Green, which was never released here in its original form. It's a modified version of Red and Blue mixed together. But I have those things. I have Rob, the Japanese version of Rob. I have all his games and accessories. I don't have the Zapper because you can't use it on an LCD screen. Rob doesn't work on an LCD screen, but I still wanted Rob because I can still get a CRT monitor, and then I could still use him and just split the signal, for example, to bypass that problem. With the Zapper, that's more difficult. Love the Naruto games that were on GameCube, and only 2 of them had been released, and the 3rd and 4th one never were, and I have those. Fans translated them. I enjoy those. My Wii is also region disabled so that I can play all the Naruto games and any games that were not released here, Captain Rainbow, and a few other things that I've played before. Kingdom Hearts to Gran Turismo that I love, Final Fantasy games. Next up is Austin Graham. Favorite looking Kamen Rider design? That's a good question because I mean there are Kamen Riders that I like more than actually like in Fies. For example, I really like how Wizard did the combos, his ultimate modes, his alternate modes, those type of things. I did like Forze's belt system. I thought that was very cool. Although I did call it when I first saw the series an ice cream cone or thing. It looked like ice cream, but after a while I was like, oh, okay, it's supposed to be all these switches and it's supposed to be rocket stuff. I get it now. Here's the next question from Ethan Makia. How do you feel about Sentai purists? That's a big can of worms. There are many people out there who, when they watch Super Sentai and then they see PR adapt it, they automatically assume PR has to follow the Sentai. If they do not follow the Sentai, it's automatically garbage, and no matter what they do, it's wrong. That is not the purpose of Power Rangers. Yes, Power Rangers adapts from Super Sentai. Yes, there are times where you're required to adapt that specific story, or it will make no sense if it's using the footage. Yes, there's specific rules in place, like you have to use the suits, the weapons, the mecha, etc. Those things are always going to be permanently copied, but the stories don't have to be copied. So when PR does its own thing, it's its own thing and it's its own series. I personally never like it when PR copies Super Sentai. It should be an original series just using material from another series, but it shouldn't match it at all. So when purists start complaining that this doesn't match Super Sentai, why are you even watching it? If you hate something, stop watching it. Next question from Terrence Jr. Will you ever review your favorite comics or do a video about your comic adventures? I did have thought about this before. I mean, I have many comics and, trade paperbacks and hardcovers that I have, and I could discuss them. I mean, the major series that my brain is filled with is like Hulk. That universe, I pretty much know everything from even the minute details, from middle name, etc., from all the other characters, etc. I can go on with a billion hours of talking about the characters from that universe, or Spider-Man, and from even some of the alternate universes I have in my head, and it's like I can go into that. But I was always afraid of talking about other things because, again, this channel is about PR and Super Sentai, and I always wondered, are people interested in that and whatnot? Now, those adventures where I buy comics, that's fairly boring. I do go to comic stores, obviously. There's many good ones in Manhattan, in Brooklyn that I've gone to, but I had no real urge to actually film and to do any of that because that's fairly boring. It's not like when we go to New Jersey and try to look for Super Sentai stuff because, again, it's Mitsuya Marketplace. It's foreign. You get to see Japanese culture. They do all these cool things, beautiful furniture, clothing, all these other extra things that make it cool. So I do film over there for that part, looking at an aisle and looking at Spider-Man 2099 and just combing through it and old Hulk is in here and blah 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 from this universe, etc. And to me, I thought it would be very boring. Next question from Angie2343. If there ever was a Neo Zordon era, would you want Alpha 5 to return? Richard can still do his voice. Same goes for Alpha 6. Would you want Wendy Lee to voice him? That's actually a very good question. I always thought Alpha was really underused and ignored more so than any PR character I could think of at the top of my head. I always wish he doesn't have to be the star or a main focal point. But Alpha is an integral character to the series, which obviously shows because he was in, for 7 years, he was in all the way up until Lost Galaxy. Yeah, we had different Alphas, from Richard Horvitz to Wendy Lee, and to the one who played in Turbo, which everyone always hates. I'm not against his return. I have no problem with Alpha returning. In fact, when Dino Charge was announced, I thought that would have been a perfect chance to bring Alpha back. And ultimately, Alpha is the voice. I would not mind if Alpha was not physically on the show, but a virtual representation of Alpha would have been perfectly fine. Like, think of how Iron Man has Homer or / Jarvis inside the movie universe. I would not have minded him to be the lab's computer that helps Kendall out. He would have been a good virtual assistant. Would I prefer Richard Horvitz or Wendy Lee, or even Yo 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 Catastrophe problem from Turbo. I wouldn't mind if the three of them were used in some capacity, all three, or they picked one. I really would not want to hear the Yo Yo Yo, but if they did hire her back, as long as they changed the way that alpha acted, I would have no objection. But of course, I would want to hear Richard Horvitz over the other two. Next question up is from Jitter Domer. What if Dino Charge was directed by Jonathan Zakor than Judd Lin? Everyone knows what would have happened to Dino Charge if Jonathan Zakor was still in control. I wouldn't be watching it right now. Ranger Review would not have come back. One of the major decisions of me canceling Ranger Review was the hatred toward Samurai and Megaforce. I don't hate the actors. I usually will never hate the actors. I usually will blame the production company and the writers. If Jonathan Zakor was in control of Dino Charge, it would have been virtually identical to Kruger. We would have probably had the Blue Ranger would have been some really bad joke guy, and everyone else would have probably been virtually the same as well. And they would have probably went as far as having Torin be in some similar capacity instead of Keeper. Sledge would never exist. They would have ended up just using what's his name? I can't even remember his name right now. The Statue of Liberty dude. They would have definitely used him as the main boss. Least amount of effort. Copy stories left and right, etc., etc., etc. And it would have been another hated season. I would have probably had given up at episode 3. Because I gave up at the end of Samurai and never went to watch Super Samurai except the first episode. And Megaforce I gave up after she made them, massage her feet, back rub. I don't even remember that monster. That was like the last time I gave up. And then I never even saw Robo Knight because I totally skipped Megaforce. Super Megaforce I stuck around only because of the whole anniversary thing, and that just went to hell. Next question from Ixia Edges. I'm curious, if they reboot Power Rangers to an actual movie again, do you prefer if they keep the motif simple and abandon the Dinosaur G-Ranger motif instead of go with a Go Ranger one? What I'm getting from this is that you're asking, will they change the entire thing where it's a different suits or in a more simplistic way? No. The MMPR reboot movie is definitely going to be an MMPR reboot movie. Those dinosaur suits are synonymous with MMPR, and no way in hell is Saban going to change those in any way except doing the movieizing version of them like how they did in the first film. They're never going to switch it to a different suit or not. That is quintessential MMPR. It's the reason why for 3 years they stuck with them and never switched them because they were too worried those were the most iconic things for the series, and they didn't want to risk alienating people, even though they did that with the season 3's Alien Rangers, which never really made any sense to me. Next up, from Grimlock. Are you and Deca Blue childhood friends, or did you meet on YouTube? No, we are actually, real life friends. Not childhood. I met him in my 3rd year of high school. So I've known him for over a decade now. And the last and final question from Julian Fagan. What is your favorite tokusatsu toy? Now, specifically a Toku Toy. That's very difficult because I have very, very many things that I do love and I love to display. But I think that to top it off, it has to be Senpujin, the Ninja Storm, the Storm-powered Megazord. I always liked everything from Ninja Storm / Hurricane. I don't know. I don't know why I love that particular season. Both versions, Hurricane and Ninja Storm, both series are equally good. I mean, both of them have their flaws. Like Hurricane has no physical presence, his identity, and he ended up, quote unquote, dying. Cam is the intelligent guy, just like Billy. He filled Billy's shoes perfectly, unlike other characters who failed. You still got to be enjoyable. Cam was always enjoyable. He had also programmed his Cyber Cam so he can be goofy in that way. He's a ranger eventually. He helps the team out in many different ways, and I always enjoyed that character particularly. But, I don't know, I just liked it because it was weird, because a dolphin, a lion from a Ferris wheel, and a burning hawk? Thanks again for watching this third Q&A video. I'll be doing these every single month, so even if I didn't answer a question or if you have a question, I'll announce the next time I'll be doing the Q&A questions, usually in the vlog episodes. So enjoy future videos to come.